I told him I was going to say that too.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So I'd like to do one more thing, give a round of applause for Mike and Connie and everybody that make this possible, because honestly, this is a great conference. I've been coming here for a few years now, and it's great to see it grow and grow and grow, and the way that they have, it's been phenomenal. It's one of my favorite conferences here in Ohio. So thank you, Connie. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everybody that puts together the conference and all that good stuff. So how's everybody doing today? Good? Great. Awesome. So my talk today is to talk a little bit about the product market that we see today, and look at what's kind of happening as far as trends in security, what works, what doesn't, all that good stuff. So a little bit of introduction. This used to be me. I was a big guy. In fact, there's actually a funny story behind that. I was on the Katie Couric show, and they had Benedict Cumberbatch. Everybody know who that is? He's an actor. He's plays Sherlock and a few other things. He played a couple in movies. Anyways, he was coming up next on the Katie Couric show, and they said, you know, hey, coming up next, one of the world's sexiest men alive. And it had my face looking like that, right? And they removed the up next piece for like a split second, and of course all my hacker buddies, you know, photoshopped, or didn't photoshop it, but grabbed that screen and said, you know, the world's sexiest man alive, and it had a picture of me, you know, with that little smirk on my face. So, but I've lost a little bit of weight since then. I've about 125 pounds since that, so it's been great. Yeah, thanks. A little about my history. One of the founders of DerbyCon. I wrote the Social Engineer Toolkit. I've testified in front of Congress twice. I'll never do that again. I'm on the news quite a bit. In fact, I was actually supposed to be on CNBC here in Columbus, but unfortunately I didn't have enough on my Tesla charge to get to the place. Anyways, long story. Forgot the charge. But anyways, I've been on a lot of the different news organizations, and I started two companies. One was TrustedSec, which is an information security consulting company in Cleveland, and then Binary Defense Systems, which is a 24/7 monitoring detection company outside of Hudson, Ohio, Cleveland still. But I was a Marine. I guess I'm always a Marine, but I was in the signals intelligence side. Got to do a lot of the signals intelligence. I deployed twice to Iraq and a bunch of other things. What's funny about the media stuff is, like, you know, when you start to do media for the first time and you're going onto a news organization, and a quick side tangent, I apologize, I promise I'll start talking about good stuff here in a second. But when you're on the media, you know, when I first did it, I was really always nervous. Like, what happens if I get a question on this, or what happens if I don't know this topic? And so I'd over-prepare, you know, for going on these, and I always be sweating and super nervous and all that good stuff, right? Nowadays, I walk in, you know, and I got jeans and a t-shirt on, and they you know, I put a little suit coat on so that I look like I'm at least somewhat professional. And I don't even know what topic I'm talking about in a lot of cases, right? I mean, I know what I'm talking about, but I don't, you know, over-prepare in a lot of cases. And so what's interesting is I'm very comfortable doing these types of things now. And about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, I was going on a news, and I won't say which news organization it was. But I was going on this news organization, and I sat down, and I'm supposed to be talking about the Iranian hacker stuff that's going on. So, you know, the Iranian hackers, you know, taking down a dam and all this other stuff, right? And so I sit down, I'm supposed to be an Iranian cyber expert on, you know, hackers intruding into our critical infrastructure and all that stuff. And I sit down, and they're like, hey, 5 minutes to go live. And when you're in front of the news, all you get is a camera screen. You don't see anything that's going on the TV or anything like that, right? And so they introduced me, like, hey, I'd like to introduce David Kennedy. He's an Iranian nuclear expert. And so, Dave, what do you think about the, like, Treaty of 1942 nuclear thing? And that's one of those moments where, like, you just, like, have no idea what to do, right? I started sweating in places I never knew I could sweat before. And so you have a split decision. You know, you have about a half a second of awkwardness on TV that you have to figure out, hey, do I try to BS my way out of some treaty in the 1800s or 1900s or whatever? Or do you try to, like, frame it to something that you know about? And so I'm like, I'm going to try a combination of both, right? I'm going to try to BS this a little bit, and then I'm going to try to get to the cyber stuff, right? So I'm like, this stuff's great, but what is that cyber stuff that's going on out there? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's fine, but let's go back to that treaty thing. I'm like, yeah, but the cyber stuff, and then eventually it was bad. But luckily there was no historical evidence of that, and no one I know of has actually seen that video, which has been great. But it's the crazy things that you kind of run into. That brings me to my topic today, which is what we're seeing today in this industry and what's kind of happening. And I think there's a lot of positives. I think there's a lot of great things that we're doing. In fact, the fact that this conference grows almost double every year, or if not more, is a testament to this industry growing and how well it's growing and the things that are happening. So we're doing a lot of great things, but what we face is really a global problem. It's something that impacts everybody. It doesn't matter what industry vertical it is. It's everything, right? Everything from critical infrastructure to retail and credit cards to, you know, trade secrets. We all know the whole shtick on what we're trying to protect, and every company is completely different. But this is a global problem that we face, and there's a lot of things that are happening right now that are the same things that happened 10 years ago, just in different capacities or different types. And so what my talk today is to look at is a combination of, one, how are the breaches that we're seeing today still continuing to happen? Two, what do we do to actually make that better? And three, what does it mean around the products that we see today that are trying to protect our infrastructure against these types of things, the technology around it, right? And so I'll hit on all of those as kind of part of this talk today. So that question is, how are breaches happening? And the second one is, why are we here today talking about this specific topic, or why are people even paying attention? And so I'll focus on the first topic, which is how are breaches happening. And if you look at how breaches are typically happening today, and I'll show you a little statistic that we did from our customers on specific breaches that they've experienced in the past. But what's interesting is that the techniques really haven't changed. It's still perimeter exploitation. It's still end-user compromises. It's still, spear phishing. What I love hearing about is how sophisticated attacks are happening, right? You hear the word sophisticated. And it's the same stuff that we're doing 10 years ago, but if you're targeted, it's now sophisticated. It could be from a kid in high school, or it could be from China, but you're sophisticated because it was targeted. And so it's the same types of methods, right? I send an email, they click a link, or it gets through some sort of sandboxing stuff that you have in front. They click a link and it compromises the machine, and now they have access to your internal network, and then they move from there, right? They move laterally environments and they go to a different system. Or they find a hole in your outside. Or an employee does something where they download a file that they shouldn't have, and now you're stuck with ransomware or whatever it ends up being. And you're getting hit with DriedX or whatever's happening out there right now. So you have all of these different components that make up our risks that we have. And I'll talk a little bit about that. The phishing side is always fun because that's the easiest, right? For me, phishing is one of those things that is a high return, low investment. It takes me about a day to really build a really good attack against an infrastructure or an organization or company. Look for key people in the organization that I want to go after. And usually those aren't the people that you typically go for. I like going for like salespeople. I've used this line many times, but salespeople are awesome. Because you can be like, literally, like, hey man, I'm going to hack your computer, but I'm going to buy your product. Can you just click this link and it's going to compromise your machine, but I still want to buy from you afterwards. And they'll be like, oh, okay, well that's cool, that's fine. Whatever. So salespeople are great, marketing's fantastic. And I don't mean to pick on those designations. It's just there are folks that aren't necessarily or traditionally been tech savvy. Folks that have been working there for long tenure. I like going after folks that are certain age demographics because a lot of cases, they're less tech savvy. I know that's a horrible stereotype, but I have higher success probability with that, right? So I'm stating the facts. So, there's certain people that I will target in organizations that I have a higher success rate of going after. And usually it takes me, to actually find somebody and target them takes like 20 minutes, right? But to build something that's super cool and easy to use takes a good day of my time. And then after that, I get access to the computers they need access to, right? I'm going to show you, this is a thing that I did at CNN, and they interviewed me in Vegas for when I was at DEF CON last year. And the news anchor is Laura Siegel. If you ever watch stuff, she's phenomenal. She's one of the best news anchors, researchers for CNN that they have. And she interviews me, and she's like, hey, I want you to hack into a company. I'm like, well, hey, I'd probably go to prison afterwards if that happens. So I'm like, can I simulate that? And she's like, well, that's cool, but it doesn't really show the real stuff. I'm like, hey, I got an idea. So I called up one of my customers that I got a good relationship with, and I said, hey, let's call him Bob, because I don't want to get the company in trouble in any way, shape, or form. But I'm like, hey, Bob, can they film me hacking into your company? It's like a free pen test, basically. And then, we'll make sure that your name isn't in any of the articles. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. Sounds good. And I'm like, okay, sweet. So I hacked into a live company, and so Lori wanted me to see what I could do hacking into a live company. So here's the segment.
Some creepy dude in a basement? Well, that's a misconception. What if I told you there's a class of hackers who don't just have social skills, they have more social intelligence than anyone
I disagree
you'll
with
ever
that.
meet.
I'm not smart. But.
David Kennedy is one of them. He's what's known as a social engineer, or a people hacker. His craft is to dupe you into doing things and sharing information you probably shouldn't.
Can I just get your credit card number? Now, funny story, there was 2 pieces of the segment. They only compacted it for this one. But Laura's like, hey, I want you to hack into my boss. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And so, the first thing I did is I looked at his social media presence, and he was saying something like, hey, I'm in, France right now covering this story or something like that, right? And so I'm like, okay, he's traveling internationally. Great, right? So I call him up, and I spoof my phone number coming from an 800 number because it looks a little bit more believable, especially in international terms. And I said, hey, I'll use Bob again as an example. Any Bobs in here? Got a couple Bobs? I'm sorry I'm picking on you, but Bobs usually always click things, and anyways. So Bob, I call Bob up. I'm like, hey, this is so-and-so from, and I'll just say fake bank. It wasn't the specific bank. But I'm like, hey, this is Bob, or this is so-and-so from Chase, Fred Cart's fraud services department. I just want to say, are you traveling internationally right now? And, one, I just established credibility, right? I know that he's traveling even though he's publicly said it. And so he says, yeah, actually I am. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense for these charges that we're seeing here. And he's like, oh, okay, that's a relief, I'm like, so did you buy, this $372 at an adult store here in Germany? And they get, like bondage here and all this other stuff, right? I made horrible things, right? That no one should ever be buying, that puts them in an embarrassing situation. It's embarrassing, right? And it puts us out of our comfort zone. And so like you get shocked all of a sudden. And what's interesting with that type of technique is that certain things that you normally would try to challenge somebody on, like if I'm starting to ask you for sensitive information, you're most likely not going to provide it. However, if you're in an embarrassing situation, you want that embarrassing situation to be over with. So there's different techniques you can use with social engineering, and this one was very effective. I don't like to use it all the time, but I kind of did it because it was funny, for the CNN crew. And so they're all laughing in the background, right? And I'm sitting there giggling too. I got on mute, I'm laughing, but he's like, no, I didn't purchase any of that. I don't know why that's there. I'm like, hey, it happens all the time when you're traveling internationally. Don't worry. Can I just go over some of the charges with you? And so I started making them worse and worse and worse, right? As I'm going through these charges. And, he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening to me. I'm like, sir, don't sweat it, Bob. We're going to reimburse you the money. You'll have it in your account by tonight. We just had to go through the charges and see which ones were fraudulent. And where are you staying? When are you returning? He's like, yeah, okay. I'm like, okay, great. So like, I just need to verify a few things of personal information. I'm like, we have your birth date. It's this. I found that well ahead of time. I'm like, so I need you to repeat your social security number. It tells me his full social security number. I'm like, can you give me your full credit card number this impact in order to verify? So he gives me his full credit card. Then I start like asking ridiculous stuff, right? I'm like, hey, what's your wife's social security number? And he's like, I don't know why I need that. But then she starts like, oh, by the way, the only guy that knows his wife's social security number, by the way, I don't know mine at all. I called my wife, like, hey, what's your social security number? She's like, seriously, you just asked me yesterday. I'm like, I know, it's gone already, all right? I think about like cats and stuff. I don't have anything. So it was very successful, but that piece that you saw there was like, hey, can I have your credit card number? Is literally what I asked him. Like, hey, can I have your credit card number? He's like, yeah, it's blah, 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 it's great. So easy ways of conning people into certain things.
Some use it for illegal activity. In David's case, companies pay him to find out if employees are leaving the company vulnerable. He and his team show us how it's done. Step 1. Spoof his number so it looks like he's calling from inside the company, and then call tech support.
Hello, you there? Hello?
Hi, this is Ken. How may I help you?
I was wondering if you can take a look at a website I'm trying to get to. It's for a big customer thing I'm working on for Monday, and I can't seem to get to the website from my computer.
Sure. What's the website? I'll see if I can get to it.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate the help. I mean, it could be a stupid thing. I'm really stuck with computers, but.
Now, interesting enough, with this one, there's certain things that when you call a help desk that you don't want to go for. Like, right, I don't want to reset somebody's password. I don't want to try to do things that's going to require a challenge question in any way, shape, or form, right? Because I don't know those questions, unless I do my homework and I try to figure it out. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to do things within this organization, this confine, that doesn't require me to verify who I am as an employee. I alleviate a little bit of trust factor because I spoof my phone number looking like I'm coming from the company itself, right? So if that person was looking at the caller ID on the phone itself, they would look like I'm coming from this corporation. So in this case, I'm trying to do things that aren't going to specifically require a challenge, like resetting passwords or, getting the sensitive information. Hey, I can't get to a website. He might go and check it really quick to figure that out, right?
So it's www.survey, that's SURVEY -pro.com.
Yeah, I got a prompt to open. I just clicked open and I'm at the site now.
Here's what the IT guy doesn't realize. By clicking that link, he's just given David full access to his computer.
Whoa, okay, that's weird. I just hit it and it works. It seems like it's working fine now. Awesome. Well, I don't know what you did, man, but I really appreciate the help.
Hey, no problem. That was easy.
That was it?
We're on his computer right now.
You were able to take over this guy's computer within, I would say, like, under 2 minutes.
Under 2 minutes, yeah. Under 2 minutes, took over his entire computer, and think of it as not just his computer, but it's pretty much a downfall of the entire company.
In this case, the company was paying David to hack them and see if their employees would fall for it. They did.
So that one was a good example of how easy it is just to go for something that works pretty consistently for us in most of the engagements that we do, hands in, hands out. But that's social engineering. Again, high return, low investment for us to get into it. And think about it as, if you're coming from this from a, hey, well, what does one computer matter? That one computer is literally typically the downfall of an entire organization, because now I have an established command and control to that one machine, and now I move to other machines to get access to the data that I want to. So I'll take information off of that machine, whether it's local administrator accounts or cache credentials or, permissions that they have access into certain systems. And then from there, I'll move to other systems to get access to that type of data that I need. So it's really a downfall of that. And what's great is, this company has a great security program. They have all the tools you can possibly imagine, application whitelisting and intrusion prevention systems and sandbox virtualization stuff and blah, 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 right? And none of that stopped or detected anything that I was doing there, right? And that's a shame, right? But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The big one now is ransomware, right? What's interesting about ransomware is that, as part of security, typically, you have some sort of component to disaster recovery and business continuity, right? And so BCP and DR kind of fall in some cases, and especially from an IT perspective. Security has a pretty big helping hand in that. I now have financial institutions, healthcare organizations, everything you can possibly imagine, trying to build ransomware into their incident response procedures. You know what those incident response procedures are? Making sure that we have enough Bitcoin to pay the ransom when it happens. Isn't that ridiculous? Like, hey, we need to make sure that we go through the whole Bitcoin process so that when we get hit with ransomware, right, that we can pay the Bitcoin immediately to get our files back. I'm like, really? You should never mind. I can't even right now. I just got to take a break. Okay, I'm gonna go get a coffee from Starbucks and go, anyways, whatever. But here's an interesting one I did on CBS. Now, what's funny about this story? When I was going to CBS, I was literally in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of nowhere in Atlanta. And believe me, there are places in Atlanta that there's like, it's like I've never seen anything like this before in my life, right? And so they called me like, hey, can you go to one of our affiliate stations down the road? And it's like 1 o'clock at night, and I had to be at this customer the next morning at like 6 a.m. And so they get a car, they bring me to this place, and I'm literally in this tiny like news broadcasting location. And it was like the most uncomfortable situation because I had to talk to a person. Like I had to look at a person and just stare at them. And I was talking to somebody on the phone. And that's such a weird dynamic when you actually have to like do a three-way talk where you're not actually talking to somebody. So I might look a little awkward in here, like with no sleep whatsoever. But this is on ransomware.
Hospital admits this morning it paid nearly $17,000 in ransom to hackers. The FBI is investigating the cyber attack that disabled the computer network at the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center. Carter Evans is at the hospital with the story behind the ransom payment. Carter, good morning.
Good morning. The hospital says patient care was not affected by the attack and computer systems are up and running again. Authorities are now searching for these hackers who were paid with Bitcoin. That's a digital currency that's nearly impossible to trace. And while the hospital says it notified law enforcement immediately, we're now learning that may not be the case.
In a brazen attack, hackers disabled the computer network of the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center. And a source familiar with the investigation tells CBS News the hospital paid the nearly $17,000 ransom to take back control before contacting law enforcement. In a statement, the president of the hospital said the quickest and most efficient way to restore our systems was to pay the ransom.
If they decided to pay the ransom, it probably means that they didn't have very good backups, they weren't able to recover the data, and that the data would have been lost if they didn't pay the ransom.
On February 5th.
So this one is a unique case because obviously there's a lot of hospitals right now getting impacted by it. And hospitals, have a lot of very sensitive systems, and they don't touch those systems, and a lot of times security is very lax in a lot of different healthcare organizations that you typically run into. And so this one was an interesting one because they actually paid the ransom before even contacting the law enforcement. Like, hey, we need to restore operations, so let's give them 17 grand. It's cheaper than having to deal with backups, I guess. So, what's not, it'd be an awesome service for these folks. Like once they do it and you get the 17 grand, they help you so you don't get affected by other Bitcoin or other ransomware scams, but only theirs, right? So we'll only affect you once a year, but we'll guarantee you that you're not going to get impacted by anybody else that's out there. I think it'd be phenomenal. Good business model, right? This is the last one I'll show on the whole media thing. This is a good one. What's funny is you typically, a lot of times you get thrown a lot of curveballs. Like I had one news anchor who was like, hey, tell me about how we can disrupt ISIS through EMPs. I'm like, I know nothing about EMPs or what the heck. I know nothing about EMPs. I'm like, yeah, I mean, anyways, so a lot of these are a little bit off the wall questions, but they're always pretty good. This one was good because it was the first real ransomware out there for Mac.
The day has come where even Mac users aren't safe from malware. Over the weekend, Apple customers were targeted by hackers using software known as ransomware. So what is that? Well, ransomware is a type of cyber threat that encrypts data on infected computers, and then hackers usually ask users to pay a ransom to release a key to their files and data. So what would that ransom be? Well, this time, the type of ransomware that was specifically targeting users who downloaded an updated version of Transmission, which is used to transfer. Am I getting in the weeds here? It involves Bitcoin, peer-to-peer file sharing money. Hackers were asking users to pay
you can see
a
my
single
facial expressions in this part right now.
Now that's worth about $411 to get their computer control
She's
back.
actually
Does
really
this
cool.
malware open the door for other hackers to attack more Mac users and maybe iPhone users? How will this impact Apple's fight with the FBI when it comes to hacking into the San Bernardino shooter's iPhone? Joining me now, white hat hacker and TrustedSec CEO David Kennedy.
I got nothing.
Apple getting it from all sides here. How fixable is this? Should anybody be paying a Bitcoin to any malware operator here just to get their control back?
Depends on whether or not you want your files back. If you have good backups, which we heavily recommend, you don't have to pay it. But if you want to get, maybe photos or things that you would lose from this, hackers are doing a good job at encrypting this. So, a lot of people do pay the ransom. Companies pay the ransom. We actually just had a hospital pay about $14,000 to get the files back that they had impacted by ransomware.
You are kidding. Now, wait a minute. What if I don't even deal in Bitcoin? Then am I not targeted here?
Well, no. So that's the problem. So, Bitcoins are the way it's almost like untraceable money, and law enforcement has a very difficult time actually tracing where the actual money goes to. And so, they'll actually give you step-by-step instructions on how you can actually pay for Bitcoins. In fact, sometimes they even have 1-800 numbers that you can call, and you'll actually get a live person that'll walk you through the steps. It's actually better customer service than Time Warner.
How is this possible, Dave? That we cannot then turn it around and trace back? Police do it every day.
Well, the problem is that ransomware is now taking shape as being one of the largest, organized crime / businesses out there, and they're usually in Eastern Europe or places that may have, lower law enforcement capabilities. And so you actually have these call centers, that have hundreds and hundreds of people working there, and these are full-fledged businesses that are making millions and millions of dollars off of doing this ransomware.
No, what's interesting about that is we actually did one for a company where they had a Bitcoin issue, and I called the 1-800 number, and I'm telling you, they're friendly people. You immediately get a person, there's no automation. They're like, we're sorry we're taking your money, but you still have to pay the ransom. I know this is an inconvenience for you. It's amazing. I felt good paying the Bitcoin ransom. It was like I know these guys are crooks, but man, he was a really nice guy. Really nice guy. Yeah. Hey, survey at the end, I would have taken it. That would have been the first time I hit 1 to do the survey to actually go and do that, right? So you look at analysis of these breaches and kind of how they're happening, right? We actually did a survey for our incident response customers that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So, we deal with, we're a global company, so we do work both here in the United States as well as kind of everywhere else. And so we interviewed our incident response groups and looking at a lot of the root causes and looking at a lot of those things. And so here's the statistics behind our data. How many people? I can't remember, but it was 127 different companies that we did analysis for. 82% happened due to endpoint compromise initially. The initial foothold in was through an endpoint compromise. That's a very high statistic. That means that the large percentage and the highest risk factor that you have in your organizations are your endpoints. But I'm sure we all, are coming to that realization or slowly realizing that that's the issue. 14% was from a perimeter compromise, significantly down from 5 years ago. If you look at 5 years ago, we were talking about SQL injection and buffer overflows and all that stuff on our perimeter defenses, and that significantly dropped off. We don't see, even from a pen test perspective, we don't typically see the full compromises from the outside happening anymore. So we've done a lot better job at securing our perimeter, which is phenomenal. So fantastic, and kudos to the industry and businesses for doing that. I think that's why you see a lot of that percentage drop. And I also think that, hackers realize that it's much easier to get to the endpoints themselves because you're using antiquated technology on the endpoints, right? Traditional things like, I don't want to point out specific things, but antivirus, right? We've known antivirus is probably dead for the past 15 years, right? When antivirus got released, it was dead, right? So, those are the types of things that we have a lot of lack of visibility into. 4% employee error. I love employees, and it's not their fault. It's just technology, right? They're not supposed to be security experts, and We're still not security experts, right? So we have to figure things out, and they have to figure things out. In a lot of cases, things like password reuses from one site to another, like using the same Gmail password as, your corporate password is the way that they got in. Or, hey, they went to a website and they downloaded something and now they have ransomware, right? So, employees were a small percentage of that, 4%. So a lot of those endpoint compromises ended up breaking those down, or more spear phishing, things like that. So why are we here, and why do we see that our highest risk factors are really towards our endpoints being compromised and our perimeters being compromised? And so why are we at this position right here today, where we're dealing with this as our biggest factor and our biggest issue? And so what I'd like to do is kind of go and take a step back and say, okay, let's look at how InfoSec evolved, okay? Because I think it's important to understand where we're at today, to understand where we came from. And this is my perception, okay? I'm a younger guy, but that seems like it's fading pretty quickly. I'm losing more hair every day. So I've been in this industry now since, I don't know, I think I started in like 1998 or something like that. So I'm still relatively new when it comes to InfoSec, right? So we started with basic building blocks. And this is what I remember from the 90s. And I don't remember much from the 90s. It's my high school time frame. But, you look at the 90s, and, we talked about security in a way that was about building blocks, right? Hey, have a firewall, segment things and move things into their own compartments and things like that, and start to build your networks in a certain way. That was the 90s. Keep it simple, because we were simple at that time. Technology was simple. And so we're like, hey, but listen, security is going to be a big deal. See, there's a hacker conference, starting out in Vegas called DEF CON, and, all these hackers are coming about, and hackers are going to be the next biggest thing. So we need to start building our networks now, right now in the 90s, right now, to be able to withstand what we're going to see in the future. Some really good visionaries on that side. But nobody listened, right? And businesses moved the way that it did, and we didn't do investment. So we cried wolf, right? We're like, hey, hackers are going to come. So we're out there crying wolf, like hackers are going to come, hackers are going to come. But they didn't necessarily really do that because our businesses are still working. Then we get PCI. And PCI was a good and a bad thing, I think. It was a good thing at the time because what PCI did is it set a baseline of what security was supposed to be. Now, a lot of people built their security programs off of PCI. And we're seeing the ramifications of that now. But what PCI did is it gave us a way to say, hey, you have to do it because the PCI said so. And so now our compliance program now has funding and has money that it never had before. And we had to do that because we have to comply to PCI. But it was still us crying wolf. Hey, we have to do this because PCI says, or hackers are going to breach and steal all of our credit cards. Right? Then Target happens. And we're like, hey, let's not be the next Target, right? And that was used like crazy. Hey, they fired the CIO, the CEO got let go. Do you want to be the next one, right? Then we cried wolf some more because we don't want to be the next Target. Then the InfoSec market went crazy because of all of these different breaches that started to happen, right? And this was relatively fairly new, 3-4 years ago. And so like executives were freaking out. They're like, whoa. Hackers got these cyber weapons. And this is what they look like. And these cyber weapons, right? And sophistication and APTs and all this other stuff. It's China, it's Russia, it's Iran. They're stealing all of our intellectual property, all this stuff. The cyber weapons, right? That's what it looks like. That's my favorite. Hackers always in the black hats and everything. That's how I hack all the time. But, and so you got these sophisticated hackers, a term that got dubbed, and anything that was a breach that related to something, if you were targeted in any way, shape, or form. The stuff that I was doing in high school now was a sophisticated tech. If you could program 3 lines of bash, you're now a sophisticated hacker, right? If you can use a command line in Metasploit, you're now a sophisticated hacker. If you can download a tool from our website and use that to hack and social engineer into another organization, you're now a sophisticated attacker. And this changed the market because now we had a release, a way of getting out of things and putting liability and shift away from the company for historically bad decisions. And so something awesome happened at this point. Something really awesome. We got money. Finally, what we've been talking about for 10 years. I don't have enough staffing, I don't have enough budget, I don't have enough this, we got it. Right? And we got people now, or at least we're trying to get people. That's hard, right? But we got money. That's what we've always been claiming. Listen, IT spending $50 million, and my budget is my salary, right? That changed, and so we got cash. We got our wish. That's what we were hoping for, to get the funding and the recognition that we wanted to be able to change a program. So if you look at the security industry, the worldwide cybersecurity market was valued at $77 billion in 2015 and estimated to grow to $170 billion by 2020. Many companies have doubled their investments recently. That's from Forbes. In the past 5 years, 1,028 investments were made in privacy security startups totaling $7.3 billion. It's a big market, right? This is the hot market right now to be in because we're growing so much. So now that we got the money, we're like, okay, we got the money. Now what? We've been crying wolf for 10 years, but now we have all of this risk that we've had for 10 years, that we've known about for 10 years. And we have this money. That's great, but how do you take that money and start to reduce the risk of an organization? And that's the toughest part about this. And so now we're like, oh, I have all this work now. I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have stack of papers, I have compliance and regulatory, I have risk and all these issues, I have all these hackers, they just came out with the new 0 day, I got to patch IE. Wait, they don't even use IE anymore, I got to go to Windows 10. You have all this stuff now that you have the buy-off on, but it's still 10 years of neglect. So then you go to hire talent, but this market is so short on talent. And so you're like, well, but I got money. I got money, but and you just sit there and you're like, this is weird. Right? Awkward. It's a random slide. So let me get this straight. You got a big pile of cash, and you don't know what to do with it, right? But you got to spend that money, because if you don't, they're like, hey, you're not going to be able to get that next year, right? So you got to spend this money. And so today is when we have the product era. That's when the product era was born. And so now you have a very hot industry with a lot of money and not a lot of solutions to actually fix the risk that you have in your organization. And so there's products coming out of every single facet you can possibly imagine. This is the next hottest thing. This stops everything. This is something, we have cyber robots that literally destroy and eliminate the hackers, right? By the way, I don't want to ruin the whole thing. It's going to be good, but we have a April Fool's joke coming out in 2 days. It's going to be hilarious. We're releasing a new tool that stops 100% of the attackers, 100%. And we have this module that we're adding. It's called the Enforcer Wing, and it's going to be a whole movie skit. But literally, it's someone that goes to the hacker's house and beats them up. So that's how we're tackling the hacker industry. We're just going to get beat up when you're hacking into somebody's company. Not going to mess with us. But anyways, so what we saw now is that we have the products, we have things that do all this great stuff, and then we look at that and we're like, well, I have to buy that because I need to do something, because right now I have all this stuff and I have enough people, so I need products. And so the focus started to become technology over talent. Because we need the new technology. We were using, old ASAs and PIXs that, we haven't touched in a few years. And by the way, let's talk some rationality here, okay? I like to throw a little thing out here for rationality, because I don't understand it yet. So you have folks that have been decent at firewalls or awesome at firewalls for the past 10 years. And they know Cisco so well. But you need to go to next gen. You have to, right? Because that's what everybody's talking about. So you're going to take those guys that have 10 years of institutional knowledge of awesome work, and then you're going to slap them to a brand new technology and expect that to work great, right? And then what do? You just use the importer tool to import all those 10 years of horrible work into that new tool that you have now, and now you're next gen, right? That's awesome. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But, hey, it's technology. And so if you look at where we're at right now, there's investors everywhere. I get calls every day trying to buy TrustedSec and binary defense. Not interested. I like having my own company. And if I don't grow, then I don't grow. That's fine with me. Cool. I'm happy where I'm at. But what you have is Series A, B, C, D, E funding, where if you're not familiar with the whole venture capitalist stuff, what you do when you have a good idea is you go to investors. This is the whole Silicon Valley thing, right? And you're like, hey, I have this awesome idea. Oh my gosh, you have an idea? Yeah, it's revolutionary, going to stop the hackers. Stop them dead in their tracks. Oh, well, here's 10 million. You got to make something for me, though. And that's what they call Series A, okay? So now you have $10 million of cash. Now you have to actually take what's in your brain and build a product on it. And so you go out and you buy a whole bunch of developers and all this other stuff, and you do these things, and you structure a company, and you build it, and you get the $10 million. Now that $10 million is gone, but you still don't have a full product yet, but you have a prototype. And you're like, well, now I got to go to Series B funding. Well, hey, it's $20 million. Cool, and I can hire some salespeople and some IT people to do this and do that. That's cool. Now I'm out of money again. Okay, so we go to Series C funding, okay? Well, we got $100 million. Now I'm just going to market the hell out of this thing, right? It might not even work. We're going to market the hell out of the thing, and it's going to be revolutionary, so people are going to want to buy it because everybody just has a ton of cash. And so that's the whole thing. And these companies are literally dropping left and right. They're dropping because they can't sustain that. If you get $100 million, you've lost all the control of your company, and now it's board of directors and all this other stuff. But now they're at a point where they have to continue to get more and more money just to have money to keep the company going. And that's where we're buying our technology from. Then they focus on negativity, right? It's the FUD stuff. Hey, we got to go through negativity to sell our products. And so the whole market now becomes about negativity, about how awful we are in security. So Chinese have penetrated every major corporation of consequence in the United States and has taken information we've never ever not found Chinese malware. Okay? And then you just see all these headlines of just negativity. To me, it feels like the situation's dire, especially if you allow that to be part of your day-to-day. Right? We're getting hacked all the time. Situation's horrible, dire. We need more money. We need more people. We need this and this. Brands in general in this industry consistently overuse fear-based tactics in order to get certain agendas pushed through. And that's the nature we live in. The truth is we're not that bad. We've come a long ways from where we're at, and I'll explain this in a little bit. But the truth is, we are getting better at what we're doing. We've learned a lot from the past 20 years of what we've done in the past and what we're doing now. My favorite quote that I guess it's my favorite quote that I ever said. It sounds so egotistical, but I like this quote, okay? 10 years of neglect isn't fixed with 1 year of investment. You can't fix 10 years of neglect in 1 year. Security is about taking what you can take in based off of the time that you have, the people that you have, and the staffing that you have to be able to do it, and breaking it down and prioritizing that. Hey, what's my highest risk right now? What's the market look like? And how do I prioritize my folks to be able to do what I need to do this year, knowing that it's not going to be perfect and that I will never be perfect. You will never be perfect in this industry. It's just not possible. Techniques are going to change. Things are going to be different. We might say that the trends right now are on endpoints, and tomorrow it's some crazy thing that hacks us all through the airwaves. Who knows, right? But what we know right now is that our highest risks are this as part of our company profile. And what I know now is that based off of the time and investments that I have, I can do this. We should communicate that. Hey, we have all this risk here. This is all the risk that we have from 20 years of just doing bad security practices. You all know about that because I've been vocal with you the entire time I've been working here about how horrible we are at security, right? So let me take this, and we're going to take it off into chunks, and this is going to be our program for the next 3 years that we focus on. You could do that. What's interesting is that the visibility in security isn't just now in IT, isn't just from the CEOs, it's from the board. This is a study from PwC. 48% of organizations that were surveyed have the board present on their overall security strategy. So many here have board members that are like up their butts all the time, like, hey, I saw ransomware, and you got to explain to them like what ransomware is and what Bitcoins are and all this other stuff. It's awesome, right? But it's visibility we never had before. And that's great that they're even asking this question. Now, it sucks when they're trying to dictate strategy and they don't necessarily understand the risks of the organization. But that's board of directors, believe me. I'm on the board of directors for IC Squared, so for the CISP, right? That's how board of directors work. We all have no idea what we're talking about. All right? I'm one of those people. I don't know what I'm talking about, right? But we all think we have a decent idea, and so hopefully we strategize and do it a certain way that makes things better. But we rely off of experts to go and do it. For me, we need prioritization, not productization. And what I mean by that is understanding that if I have a program that isn't working the way I need to, but I have a program and I need to augment that with technology, that's great. Fantastic. Then go do technology as long as you can handle it. But every time you introduce a new piece of technology, you introduce a brand new piece of complexity. And do you already have enough people and staffing and everything else to handle what you're currently doing? Are you doing things right in all your areas that you need to buy another piece of technology and introduce more complexity into your environment? And that's the difference. We buy things before we think. We go and we do things in a direction because it's myopic. It's very small. It's tangible right now, but not in the long term. It's very myopic. So here's some statistics here from E&Y. What threats or challenges are the greatest concern of you? Of course, sophisticated attacks targeted at your organization, right? The sophisticated hacker stuff, right? Phishing, social network exploits, and other forms of social engineering came in largely second. Accidental data leaks and end users who fail to follow security policy was third. Okay, so those are the three top concerning things. But the two top ones, by far, are going to be sophisticated attacks and social network exploits. What do we spend our time on? Well, they have answers for that. 20% is on sophisticated attacks. Right? Our largest concern we spend 20% of our time on. 31% we spend on phishing, social network exploits. And the third one of that is accidental data leaks by end users who fail to follow security policies. Notice a little bit difference here when we actually focus our time on. Look at the 35% as the highest. Security vulnerabilities introduced by my own application development. Internal mistakes or external attacks that cause my organization to lose compliance. Security vulnerabilities introduced through the purchase of off-the-shelf software. Those are the three highest categories that we spend our time on. Yet our biggest risks that we know of are the sophisticated attacks and the end users, right? We spend most of our time fighting fires. So what does work? I talked a lot about, hey, we have a lot of issues that we deal with, but we are getting better. What does work? First is that approach. Step one is to any successful program, in my opinion, is the approach that you take towards your security program. And I'll actually give you a couple little bit for the technical folks out there. I got some technical nuggets for you too that'll help stop people like me. But step one is the approach. What is your plan for actually reducing risk in your company? Because we have to still take a risk-based approach. There's no question about it, okay? I think we've all matured in this industry. I was one of those naysayers about the whole risk thing like a long time ago, right? Because I was a young kid hacking into computer systems. What's this whole risk thing? I just want to break into computer systems. And we have to figure out a way to prioritize and figure out what that is in our company. There's no question about that. So the first one is approach. Second is the basics. We're not even doing the fundamental basics. Does anybody know today what my main method for compromising and getting access to things like domain controllers and databases and things like that are? What's my number one way that I break in? Aside from the end user is given, right? I mean, those are quick, whatever, right? But after that, once I get into systems, how do I find other exposures to get into the organization? What's the number one that I do? Default passwords. It's not some crazy, sexy exploit. If it is, it's MS-Otis 6.7, which was released in 2008, still in companies today. WTF, barbecue. It's not good, right? It's the simple stuff, the basics. If you look at, and I don't like using a lot of the Verizon data breach report stuff, but there are some good nuggets in there. One of them is that was something like 99% of all breaches that occurred from the prior year happened from a CVE that was 2 years or older. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, right? So we're not even doing the patching and the hardening of our default stuff, but you need this next-gen product. The basic stuff takes work. It takes you to actually have to physically change culture. It requires you to interact and break things that impact the business. It happens. But guess what? You should clarify that with your management. Listen, you guys have been doing bad stuff for 10 years. In order for me to fix it, I'm probably going to down a couple things here and there. It's going to happen. I had that same conversation. I was the chief security officer at Diebold, and the CEO at the time was Tom Swidarski. And Tom was someone I admire because he was one of those people that would listen to the people and make decisions based off of their expertise. And that's phenomenal when you have a leader like that, right? And I said to Tom, Tom, you guys just decided to stop patching for 2 years because you didn't want to impact the business. He's like, what? I never authorized that. I'm like, yeah, so in order for me to fix this stuff, I'm going to break things. He's like, break whatever you want. And he's like, hang on. Before I rephrase that, I was like, I was already getting my phone out ready to break stuff. But he's like, but do it in a way that makes us better. And so we had issues. We had things where I was doing a assessment on one of our applications, and I found blind SQL injection. And I accidentally, when I did it, I made a true statement on a forget password reset and reset everybody's passwords completely in our entire customer database, which is a nightmare, right? And you get a call, you're like, hey, are you messing with this application? I'm like, maybe. You don't want to admit that, right? You're like, you're like, oh man, am I getting fired? But but it's funny, like when you're the chief security officer for a Fortune 1000 company, and they have meetings, every week about like top threats and stuff like that, and you're the top threat for the organization every week, and you wear that with a badge of pride. You're like, yeah, you guys are slacking over there, right? So the whole thing was trying to get the bigger threats. So they were like, anyways. But it's the basic stuff that really is the big deal. But it requires you to break things. But that should be communicated. Listen. In order for me to change things, I got to do some drastic stuff to fix where we're at. We got to fix vulnerability management. We got to fix our application security, or our application coding process, or secure our SDLC. There's a lot of things that we have to do to fix the basics. Third for me, and this has been through my whole life, is I value people first over anything else. I believe that people will make a good decision on something versus a piece of technology. So I value people over technology any day. The problem in corporations, though, is headcount in people is one of the most difficult things to get. Right? Getting people in most organizations is very tough. So you have to figure that hurdle out. The people are going to make or break your program. People that you rely off. There's no way that I, as a person, can run 2 companies if I didn't have the people with me to be able to run those companies, because they run those companies. I don't do anything. I mean, like I make fun of them and stuff, but we do memes every once in a while. But aside from that, so you have people as your core piece of what you do, and that has to be part of your program. Get good people. 4 is visibility. Visibility is such an ambiguous term because we went with SIMs, right? SIMs were going to be the save-all of giving us visibility where we had deficiencies. And it was easy because we said, well, listen, we can deploy these multi-million-dollar server infrastructures and everything else, and we can get syslogs and all this other stuff and send it centrally here, and now we have visibility into the environment, right? It doesn't impact us. So it's kind of security's way of finally getting to a point to where we can have visibility. The problem is you have so much data, you have no idea what to do with it. No idea. So now it's just use cases for compliance. Like, hey, we need this for SOX, we need this for PCI, and we might have a couple of cool feeds that we pull IP addresses from, and then we use the default content out of this, it's going to be great, right? The time that it takes to actually build in a good understanding of what's happening requires you to actually understand those applications. Like, hey, this application does this, and this is normal traffic, this is not normal. You actually have to go to an application and do that and figure that out. You have to work with the application team. You actually have to do things. It's not just send all this ion cannon data back to the SIM and all of a sudden you're going to get it. So visibility to me is not just getting the information. It's what you do with that information and getting visibility into your endpoints. I mean, what's great is they have the SIM infrastructure. Like, oh, that's awesome. It looks like you have a great SIM implementation. What are you doing for your endpoints? Oh, we don't look at our endpoints. Like, okay, that's great. We're not looking at our endpoints. Biggest risk that we have, we're not looking at them. Interesting. Step 5, stop buying stuff. Okay? Just for a little while, just stop buying stuff. You don't need to buy anything right now. You're good where you're at. The stuff that you have is perfectly fine. You don't need to make a multi-million-dollar investment to phase something out that you already have the people and the expertise in going and doing. Those are my 5 steps that I think are important. Now, from a tech dump, what can you do right now? There's some things that I like to put into my slides that are things that I attest to that make it much more difficult for me as an attacker. And if these small things are in place, it really makes my life hell. It does. So the first one is either randomize or disable local admin accounts. Local admin accounts on servers and workstations. You know, you might get some feedback from your help desk. Well, hey, I need to log in with a local admin account. You know, if the computer gets disjoined from the domain. Well, if you reboot in safe mode, it re-enables the admin account, so there goes that argument. So you have the ability to disable local admins, okay? Disable them, get rid of them. You don't need local admins. Use your domain accounts for that. You don't need local admins. The main way that I get in is I compromise, I escalate my permissions, I grab the hash values off of one system, and then I move to the rest of the systems in your environment, okay? Lower use of privileged accounts. Do domain admins ever need to log into a member server? No, they do not. You should never have a domain admin ever logging into a member server ever. Period. That's what server admins are for. Use those, that's great. But don't expose your domain controllers. When you have domain admins logging into other servers and other systems, you now are leaving Kerberos tokens and cache credentials and a bunch of other remnants across your whole network. And those are your king. That's your king. You know, that's what you don't want to lose in your environment is your domain controllers. That's authentication, that's group policy, that's software deployment. That's everything. There's no reason for you to have those domain admins. Do not introduce new tech to an already over tech company. I already said that. This one group policy is phenomenal. It's deny access to this computer from the network. Do your admins ever really need to access admin shares? When I say admins, the local administrator accounts ever need to access admin shares? No. Then why are they there? Limit that one. I can't pass the hash and I can't move laterally environments. I can't do WMI injection, PowerShell injection, all this other stuff. I can't use PSExec. It goes away because I don't have those permissions. You can still have server admins or endpoint admins or whatever in that group, but you can define the group there. But get rid of your local accounts. There's no reason for those to be in there. That stops a lot of it. Now, this might be hard to see, and I apologize. If you follow my Twitter account, it's @HackingDave. I'll post the code to this in my Twitter feed as soon as I get done. I forgot it was going to look horrible on a white screen. But this thing's called honey tokens. These things are ridiculously hard for me to figure out because whenever I run into them, they really mess me up. One of the main methods that I use is what we call Kerberos impersonation. What happens is that when you log a new machine, the machine then creates a Kerberos token for single sign-on for that account, right? So if a admin logs in, or a user account, or a domain admin, or a member admin, whatever it ends up being, those Kerberos accounts and those tickets are valid for a certain period of time, valid, based off of your group policy settings. I think default settings is 12 hours, or 8. So I have an 8-hour window to find a Kerberos token. Well, there's a tool out there called Mimikatz, but there's also variations of that, Windows Credential Editor and a few other ones. And those specific ones, what they do is they use an undocumented feature in LSASS to extract clear text passwords in memory, or you can use things like impersonating Kerberos tokens or extracting those Kerberos tokens to become that person without even needing to know the password. And so what you can do with honey tokens is you can create fake honey tokens throughout your whole environment, or your whole network. And then there's, what ends up happening is when I go to impersonate that or use that account, even if it's not active, there's a Kerberos pre-auth that gets sent to your domain controllers. And if you monitor for that one specific event log in your SIM infrastructure, and if that ever happens, if that you ever see that one right there, you have an issue. You have a problem. That's a known, no false positive, like stuff's bad on your network. People are using NeMe and a bunch of other stuff in your environment. So honey tokens, there's a one-liner command that you can run. You can create a scheduled task that creates, it's the net-only command. That you run, and then it basically goes and it will create those Kerberos tokens in your environment. Just create a scheduled task that runs across your whole environment, and boom, now you have honey tokens in your environment. No impact to systems, no one notices it, and it's one of those things that literally are one of those early warning indicators that something amiss is happening. If you're not familiar with Emmet, you should be. The Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit. Version 5.5 was released about a month ago. Emmet is a free tool from Microsoft. Free. You can go and download it right now from Microsoft's website. It's really hard to install. You just double-click the MSI, you hit next, use recommended settings, and finish. You're done. You can also deploy it. A lot of companies are spending a lot of time focusing on this one specifically. People freak out because like, oh, it breaks this, it breaks that, it breaks this. Emmet is a very flexible, if you know what you're doing, way to make and stop a lot of the zero-day stuff that you see out there. It's not perfect in any way. There's ways of getting around Emmet. But what it does is that you give it a file, and you can have it managed completely through group policy now with 5.5. It's group policy centric, so you can use that. But what you can do is you can say, okay, I only want you to protect these applications. Endpoints, what are those going to be? Browsers, Office documents, PDFs, Adobe, right? Right? Java, ooh, right? Java. I didn't want to see the whole word. It makes me sick. But anyways, got a rare stomach condition for Java. But when you want to protect the applications that you know attackers are going to use. And what happens is that when you specify those applications and Emmet is installed on machines, what happens is that it imports what's called emmet.dll into those things, and it looks for those zero-day activities. There's methods that I use as an attacker, things like what we call return-oriented programming, or ROP, to get around data execution prevention, or ASLR, address space layout randomization, all these technologies that are designed to stop us. They're known patterns. And so what Emmet does, it looks at that and it says, hey, that's a ROP gadget. That should not be executing, and it stops it and shuts it down, and it doesn't allow that exploit to trigger. So it stops a lot of the zero days that are out there. It's a very good and effective tool that's free for you right now to be able to use and get you endpoint protection. So those are some of the 5 ones. So the truth is that things are not that bad. It's not that bad out there. There's a lot of things that we can do. We are getting better. It just takes some time to go through and do it. One thing to know is that for me personally, I live my life in a way that I always try to stay positive. It's funny because my wife watches like all these horrible TV shows. Like she's watching the O.J. Simpson trial. I'm like, hey, want me to tell you how that comes out? Or like, murder mysteries and all this stuff. And she can't even tell me about them because I try to live my life. And maybe it's tucking my head in the sand and I don't want to know about it, but I try to live my life through positivity. And with all this fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we hear in this industry, it's not healthy. In fact, it really ruins you scientifically in your body for a lot of the negativity that you had. So it's not even healthy to even deal with this type of stuff. And so I recommend a little bit of positivity. Now, one thing I will show you is that there's a great book out there I recommend. It's called Originals. And it's interviews from some of the most famous people you can possibly imagine. Steve Jobs, a lot of the other ones. The guy that wrote the book, I think, is a professor out of Wharton. And so it was a really good book for me to at least go through and watch and why people were successful and how they're able to change what was standard and what was normal, right? Because normal isn't always better. People like Elon Musk that are going and doing SpaceX and using off-the-shelf commercial, things to be able to build rocket ships, or, changing the way that we do certain things around batteries and things like that. How do they do that? How does Apple change and go a different way than everybody else in the past when everybody was using Microsoft? How do you do that? And what was interesting and what was a common theme behind all of these people is that they try to look at the positives of everything. They woke up in the morning positive about what they were doing, and they knew that they can change it eventually. And so that's a common thing in security. If you wake up in the morning saying, hey, I'm not going to be able to tackle every single thing that's going on right now in this world, but I can do my best and try to do my best, you wake up a much better person than having to have the weight of the world on your hands and being stressed out all the time. Another interesting thing is that Steve Jobs failed a lot of times. A lot of times. He is quoted as saying like there's a company coming out in the medical field that was supposed to revolutionize the medical field of what they were doing. And I don't remember the exact specifics of it. But Steve Jobs said this is going to be the biggest company that you're going to see in this world. He wanted to give them like $100 million for 10% of the company. And the person at the time said, no, I don't want your money, and I'm going to go build this out myself. And Steve Jobs was so convinced that he went to all of his friends and all of his other people and was talking about how awesome this was, and he was 100% certain. That company was last year was one of the worst tech failures that has ever happened in the medical industry or ever in the history. Steve Jobs got it way wrong, right? And the reason is because Steve Jobs is very good at what he knows. But that gives you a confidence in other areas that you might not know. And so for me, I think I know security somewhat decent, so I stay within the confines of understanding security and what I know, but I rely off of everybody else to make good decisions on what that means in business to understand what's going on. Like, if I know my business is doing well from the experts in the business, and I know that folks in IT got disaster recovery and everything else working well, and I know all these different areas of what I need to have a successful programmer working, that makes me make better decisions about where I need to focus my efforts on. I really recommend this book. Appreciate everybody's time. I do have a, this is the end of my talk, by the way. I do have a winner for something at the booth. Justin Prather from Scott's. You here, Justin? Well, he's not here, so we're going to ship it to him. Or I'm actually going to probably use it on the way home. Either way. Cool. Anyways, I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much for coming to my talk, and hopefully you learned something. I know we have some stuff happening afterwards, giveaways and things like that, but thanks for sticking around and hearing me rant for a little bit. I appreciate it. Thank you.